real frustrating things about life and leadership is that often circumstances happen to us which are unpleasant, which force us to change directions. You cannot be in life and ministry without seeing this happen. It's certainly happened to me many times. And right now I'm standing at an entrance to the theater at Caesarea by the sea, where the Apostle Paul was held in prison for 2 years before leaving for Rome. This is a place where probably Paul never was because he was in the prison and not the theater. But what's really fascinating was who was with him when he was here at Caesarea. You have to backtrack a little bit. In Romans chapter 1, Paul had prayed to go to Rome. However, instead of going west, where he was writing from Corinth to the Romans, instead of going west, he is going to go east and come to Jerusalem. He has his purpose for doing that, taking an offering to the poor saints in Jerusalem. And so, you read in Acts chapter 20, he has gathered a delegation from the churches which he has founded on the first and second missionary journeys. They're ready to go with him when a plot is discovered on his life, and he heads by himself back from Greece up to Macedonia, to Philippi, where someone comes into the text of the book of Acts that is self-identified, never by name, but by a plural pronoun, we, W-E. There are 4 such we sections in the book of Acts that let us know the author is not identifying himself, but he is present, is in the scene. Now, by the way, just a parenthesis here. It's really Jesus' story, not our story. If you look at the Gospels, none of the Gospel writers name themselves. The superscription of the Gospels is added by others. It's as though the Gospel writers are telling us again and again, it's his story, not my story. We need to remember that as pastors and leaders, that our names need to be very small or not at all, and his name needs to be very large. Luke never identifies himself by name, even though he writes more of the New Testament than anyone else. And sometimes we falsely think Paul wrote the most. Paul did write 13 letters, but if you look at the words, the third gospel, the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, Luke wrote more words than anyone else. Now, backtrack here to Caesarea. How does he fit into the situation? Well, at Corinth, there was an assassination plot on Paul's life, and because of an assassination plot, an unwanted circumstance, Paul heads up to Macedonia, where at Philippi, we comes into the picture. And Luke then is with Paul when he comes to Jerusalem, and then Paul is arrested and he is sent to here to Caesarea. Luke evidently is not arrested, and when you open Luke's gospel, Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, he identifies the fact that he has interviewed the eyewitnesses and consulted all the written records. Now, Luke is the only non-Jewish writer of Scripture. You can very clearly see through some of the hints in his gospel that he is a medical doctor, some of the things that he says. For example, Peter's mother-in-law in other gospels is ill with a fever, but in Luke's gospel, she's ill with a high fever. It's a precise diagnosis. But so you ask the question, how did Paul's imprisonment have to do with the writing of the New Testament? Well, if there had not been an assassination plot on his life, he would not have gone up to Philippi. Had he not gone to Philippi, he wouldn't have picked up Luke. Had he not brought Luke, the only non-Gentile writer of Scripture, Luke wouldn't have had the 2 years to traipse around all of Jerusalem and Galilee to gather, to interview the eyewitnesses, to talk to people who'd seen Jesus. And so while Paul's sitting in prison, the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts is being written. And actually, the book of Acts is kind of like an appellate brief to the court in Rome, showing the Romans that Christianity, by its very nature, is not an incendiary or a revolutionary faith. In fact, Luke notes specifically in Paul's treatment here that they couldn't even figure out a charge against him. He's being sent to Rome simply because he had appealed because he couldn't get a fair treatment here. So what do we say about this? We simply look at Luke, we look at the Apostle Paul, we look at the downtime in his life, and we say, well, God is at work in the good times as well as in the difficult times. In the times when we don't see what's really going on, He sees what's going on. And because of Paul's imprisonment at Caesarea, we get Luke Acts. And later, because of Paul's imprisonment in Rome, we get things like Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon, 1st and 2nd Timothy, and Titus. All of that comes out of down times. So we can be encouraged if you're going through a struggle, if you're going through a tough time in your life, if things aren't going the way you wanted them to go, if you had to take a direction you hadn't planned to take, God nevertheless is at work. Trust Him. He sees the whole picture.